Like the mouth of moon in the soil in the earth, breaking through the rocks, growing wild and tall till the buds begin to pop. So pack me in a bowl or roll me in a split.
Hey, this is Ryan Herron and Amanda Breeze here to talk about all the fun stuff about one of our favorite plants, cannabis. Stick with us for updates on the industry, the most dank herb, and explorations of flavor, aroma, and effects. How are you doing, Amanda?
I'm super good today. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. It's another hot day in Oregon, working in the backyard a little bit, trying to get some work done for some clients, but I'm loving your backdrop here. Tell us where you're at.
Yeah, I am alive today from Anara's Apothecary in Toronto, and I picked this little nook, which is the herb section. So as you can see, we have an excellent herb selection happening behind me, and this store is amazing. It is where I first started learning about the therapeutic effects of terpenes because they teach aromatherapy and holistic aromatherapy here. And I actually took the apprenticeship program. So a lot of my base knowledge of terpenes comes from all of the classes and all of the products that they make and sell here.
Very cool. Yeah, I think a nice intro for someone who is has question marks around terpenes is if you've ever gone into the forest and smelled that forest air, you have experienced terpenes, right? And probably their benefits. But really they're in all kinds of plants, and even some insects use terpenes to communicate. So they're all over the place, and especially used in aromatherapy and creating products, right?
Absolutely. And, aromatherapy, when I first started the program here, I wasn't super interested in working with essential oils. I always kind of thought it was just sort of like a little woo-woo sort of activity. And it is not. And the more time you spend in cannabis, researching terpenes, and as the industry continues to move forward, caring so much about flavor, aroma, and effects, and how all those things are related, aromatherapy is the basis of where all of that comes from. And so I feel very lucky to have a friend who runs this amazing shop. We have over 500 essential oils here, and
Wow.
essential oils are often around 95% terpenes. So it is different, it is extracted either through distillation or cold pressed from single botanical sources. And that's why you'll have an orange essential oil or a palmarosa or whatever. There's so many different ways to extract them. But at the end of the day, it's the act of extracting the aromatic molecules and then using them therapeutically. And so here you can use it by smell alone. So people often love working with essential oils with diffusers, which is hugely popular. But also we practice holistic aromatherapy, which is when you apply terpenes to the body. And so in that way, you're absorbing them into your skin, but you're also smelling them at the same time. So you get this 2-for-1 situation. And terpenes can be absorbed quite deeply into the body through the skin. And that's why it's really amazing when formulating that we work with essential oils as well as cannabis, because cannabinoids can actually piggyback deeper into your body on terpenes because of how the size of their molecules and how they get absorbed into the skin. And then we can take that, of course, a step further and decide, what is our carrier for all of these things? What kind of oils are we going to use? So there's so much to think about. And at places like this, an apothecary is sort of where it all comes together and where you can discover all of the different options to formulate, but also to learn about the therapeutic effects and really create purposeful, effective products with or without cannabis. But we're here to talk about weed. So obviously cannabis products, this is a great place to look for raw ingredients.
Yeah, yeah. And I think there's just a lot of exciting things you can do with cannabis, right? You can make topicals, you can make edibles, you can make, a room fragrance. There's a lot of just really wild things that this plant can provide. And so we can take advantage of it in a lot of ways. We can enjoy it in a lot of ways. And I think that that's one of the great things about cannabis. There's so many new avenues. I remember when we were just kind of switching from like this medical market here in Oregon to recreation. And we had a full year here where there was like, you could put anything in shops as long as it was like properly licensed and labeled, but it could really come from anywhere. And there was like very few food safety rules. And you would get things like medicated bacon or like medicated hot sauce. And we saw like topicals of every single kind you can imagine, in everything from like really like Swan black bottles to like homemade in somebody's jar, like hand labeled. And a lot of those like hand labeled products ended up becoming mainstreams on the market today, just because they were so effective that they just built like a growing customer base of people who just always come back for that specific topical because it helped with eczema or whatever. It's pretty cool. Like for me, that sort of anecdotal evidence is proof enough that these products work. But you can go ahead and dig into white papers and abstracts all day that show the efficacy of things like mint oil on people with epilepsy, right? Or CBD and other terpenes on people with epilepsy. They kind of help and interact in the same way. So we know for a fact that these are effective products. So it's kind of like sky's the limit with what we want to do with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, similarly, when we're talking about cannabis, we're talking about a plant. And so it could fall under the umbrella of herbalism. And there's a lot of amazing herbs that you can combine with cannabis. And some people look at herbs and think, oh, that doesn't do anything. It's just a tea. It's just an infusion. Like it's just a green leafy thing. How could it possibly have these effects? But herbalism and herbal traditions have been around for centuries. So combining something like arnica, which has a very rich history in the folk tradition of pain relief, with an infused cannabis oil can make a more effective product. And often those little hand labeled jars are herbalists like myself who are able to bring all of their different areas of expertise together to formulate these really fantastic products. On the flip side, sometimes what you have is a brand or company that might have an existing product line that maybe is selling really well and they want to jump into the cannabis market. So sometimes they'll just add cannabis on the back end as an extra ingredient. And those don't always work out because you can't just put any kind of weed into anything and call it a cannabis product and call it effective. So focusing on the ingredients, the purpose, the most effective ways to infuse things. A few years ago, I was at a cannabis expo in Toronto, and I was looking around and seeing a lot of, I don't know what it's like greenwashing. It's like cannabis washing of products. So I was seeing companies who sold kitchen products like racks for industrial kitchens and trying to sell as flour drying racks. And if you've ever dried flour, one look at them, you're like, oh, that is not going to work for drying flour. But then there was a ton of other products there. One that shocked me to my core was a clay, a type of clay. So you mix it with a little bit of water and then you make a clay face mask. And so they were advertising it as being anti-inflammatory because they'd added CBD isolate to it. So unfortunately, topical isolate is not very effective for pain relief. When we're working with topicals, it's often better to use full spectrum oil infusions. So right off the bat, that was, a bit of a red flag for me. But also a face mask is designed to be on your skin for only a few minutes. And at that point, it wouldn't be able to soak in very deeply. Plus, mixed with the clay also doesn't soak in very deeply. So at the end of the day, the formulation of this product could be something, but it was a few steps short of being effectively formulated to do what they were advertising it to do. And so that's when just adding weed to something like clay is amazing for your skin, and infused oils, cannabis infused oils are amazing for your skin. But the way that it went about being formulated isn't what I would have done, and is not, I wouldn't recommend that product.
Right. Yeah. And we have seen just a real I was going to say a handful, but way more than a handful. We've seen like entire industries worth of bunk products come out, especially with like CBD and some of the like Delta 8 variants to get around local laws. Uh, just it's really I think difficult to trust anything that might just have like a weed label or a weed leaf on the packaging these days, because so many people try to like rush into the industry, like you said, just like either slap a little weed on their product or kind of like lean into that. And I think we've, at least in the like legal markets, burnt out on that enough that just buying a incredibly expensive face lotion at like the local Whole Foods is like usually not your best bet.
Yeah, it's really important to look at the ingredients. For example, I make infused bath products, and my bath melts are really quite small. You know, they're about this big. Whereas when you think of a bath bomb, sometimes they're really ginormous. And so as a topical formulator, I can tell you that the bulk of that giant bath bomb is going to be baking soda. And that's what's the binder. That's what's going to hold it together. It's going to give it that fun, dynamic look. There's going to be some citric acid because that's what makes them fizz when they're in the water. So you're going to have these powder products present. And then, you know, depending on what kind of weed, how they chose to infuse it. I'm not saying they're not effective, but my teeny little bath melt, I make them with 90% cocoa butter. So you're just getting total moisture and none of the filler. So when you're sitting in the bath, you're not like a gravy sitting in baking soda. You're, you know, just sitting in delicious cocoa butter, and you don't really need that much to get that, you know, full skin moisture vibe. So yeah, formulating products is challenging, but rewarding when done right. And so I have seen some amazing products on the market here. And oftentimes they're people who came from the legacy market or who came from an herbalism or aromatherapy background, who have those skills and know all these amazing ingredients, and then kind of bring them together to create something that really works for people. The most disappointing thing for me as someone who makes a lot of topicals is when I meet someone and they say, "Oh, I've tried topicals, they don't work." And I'm like, "Oh, what did you use? Was it one of these clay CBD things? Was it, you know, something claiming it wasn't something?" And it's so disappointing to hear that, because you never know, like, what store did they pull this from, and why didn't it work? What were the ingredients?
Yeah, that is kind of tough too. With just cannabis in general, is that you almost have to find like what works for you, and it should probably be a good product. And then you have this kind of like experimental phase to see what works and how much, sort of thing, right? And I guess it's not exactly the same with topicals, but just because you had one bad experience doesn't mean that there's not some other really great products out there for you.
Yeah.
You know, and I have never created a topical, but I have used a lot of like cannabis resins in food, and then I've also used a lot of like terpenes and isolates in things like candles and soaps and fun promotional products that we've created. So I think that there's a lot of like really fun space in there too. Like at Abstract Tech a little while ago, there was a big beer conference, and one of the hops farms needed this hops soap to promote their product. So they were able to take these basically hops isolate blends and use them to create a very faithful recreation of the hops that they promote, and scent this soap in a really interesting way. So everyone at the hotel had it sitting there waiting for them, and that's just like a fun promotional way to enjoy these kind of like aromas. And I feel like there's so much more space to do like fun cannabis scents in settings where you're also enjoying it, right? Like I love the idea of going to a dinner and you're smoking some really uplifting strain, and then we're lighting candles and we're enjoying these terpenes and inhaling these through another method, and then the effect can kind of shift at that point.
That sounds so nice. How do I get invited?
Yeah, exactly. The smoking spot. You have to get an the right invite, right? You want to show up at the right smoking spot at the right time.
Right? Yeah, that sounds really lovely. I would love to do some events like that. I think it's so fun. I've been asked a few times to, help craft some of these one-off value products like a bar of soap or like a candle, and there's so many cool ways to do it. Like Abstracts does make amazing terpenes, but I've also would love to see more of the skunk. Like I like that things are generally, we always lean towards the more delicious aromas and the sweet aromas,
Sure.
blue dreams and the grapes and the fruities, but I would like to see some products with a little more stink to it, a little
Totally.
more skunky.
Yes, that's what I get excited about when I'm like at a baseball game, and I'm like, oh, what is somebody smoking something good? It's not like, oh, somebody smoking weed, whatever. It's like, what is that?
Yeah.
So yeah, hey, because I would wear that, mix that in a little bit. You do see that in perfume development a lot, right? Like we saw it's kind of sad, but we hunted the civet musk ox to extinction
Wow.
because it made this like funky fixture that was like a great base note in perfumes that people like really love the smell of. And so that's no longer a thing, right? Same thing with what is it, ambergris in Wales, right? This very funky, like incredibly big scent that's just overwhelming in small amounts. People love it. They go wild for it in perfumes. So much that I believe it's now illegal to use ambergris in perfumes, or unless it like washes up on shore or something.
Yeah, I would. That would be kind of like a dream come true, walking down the beach. I mean, it's probably more likely for you being on the coast than me being. I don't think Lake Ontario. Though one time a coconut did wash up. I don't know where it came from, but I ate it. It was delicious. But we do perfumery here with all of the oils that we have, and that's one of the things that you get taught is like you always need that little stink to enhance the deliciousness. And we have an essential oil here. I'm trying to remember what it's called, but it smells like rotting caramelized onions, but like
Ooh,
rotting. Don't think of a
ooh,
delicious caramelized onion. Think of
sure.
a rotting onion smell. It is
Yes,
so foul. And I smell it sometimes.
of course.
When
Yeah, I
I'm
would too.
here because it's important to, you know, a good reminder of delicious things and non-delicious things. But really, you would use like a single drop in your formula to just have that little extra flavor punch popping through. But that's we have a few gross ones here for sure.
I mean, if you're someone who appreciates scent, then you can't ignore those terrible smells. Like uh, the corpse flower that I got a chance to go see while I was in Bloom here in Washington, actually, was a once in a lifetime experience. Like I would not give that up. I don't know if I would seek out another one, but it was definitely something I needed to add to the smell banks.
Love that. I was reading Avery Gilbert's book. I'm like a
Yes.
huge, super, super fan of his everything he does. And his company is called Headspace. And I actually had to look that up because I was like, I'm sure that means something, but what does it mean? And I hope I get this right here. It's a thing that can actually absorb smell, like it sucks in the smell and it can hold the smell. So you can go in one of his books, I think it's The Nose. He talks about the hills of Northern California and this sweet breeze coming through, and not specifically related to the cannabis aroma that is ever present in the fall, but more so the sweet breeze over a mountain, the hot summer air coming through, that like delicious floral you get when you're really out of a city and you're really somewhere where we don't get sweet breezes here at all. That it's not a thing that happens in Toronto. But when I do escape, that sweet breeze smell. And anyway,
Oh,
they
definitely.
they used one of these like Headspace containers to suck in the smell to try to recreate it.
Oh, wow.
And I've been thinking about those a lot lately, because this is the season to collect smells, right? It's summer.
Yeah, I think about that too. We've seen Mandy Aftel, we've talked about her, this perfume builder and scent expert, and she will pack a rotovap and just go off somewhere and find like a specific patch of sage or whatever and run that through and collect that scent and then sell it off at, specific milliliters. And there's no reason, hey, let's do it. All of these, they're so fleeting, right? And even once you collect the scent, like you can only hold on to it for so much. And I feel like a lot of the perfumes we do see that have these really like classic scents that will live in the bottle for years are a lot oftentimes like synthetics and things like that, because like you were saying, like the more like live the scent is, I believe it's probably more prone to like degradation and breaking down and kind of shifting off flavors.
Yeah. I had an interesting breakthrough. I guess it was probably, I want to say 10 years ago when I was living in Portland. And Portland is the city of roses, right? Roses grow everywhere. And where I was staying, the person had filled their backyard with rose bushes. So there was roses of every kind. And that was sort of my early days of foraging and eating wild things and exploring that sort of hobby and lifestyle. And so I had just learned that you can eat roses. You can just pick a petal right off a rose and eat it. And because, Portland, a lot of the roses are not organically cultivated in public spaces. I was just walking through this person's backyard, just trying different colored roses and seeing what so yellow had a certain flavor and pink had a certain flavor. And I was just exploring these. And, then I took it a step further and I said, let's make some rose sugars. So we started infusing sugar with roses, and that was really delicious. And I was thinking, what else can we do with these roses? And I learned about floral waters. So I made my first attempt at making a hydrosol, which is a steam distilled plant, and you collect the steam and that becomes the floral water. And they're also known as fractal waters because through the steam distillation, the minutest parts of the plant are collected as well as the aroma. And now years later, I can tell you that hydrosols are actually co-products of making essential oils. So all these pieces start to fit together. But I decided to make a rose hydrosol. I had never done it before. I did the DIY method, which is you just get a pot of boiling water and you put a bowl in it, and then you flip a pot lid upside down and the steam collects in the bowl, and you put the plant in the water so it's steaming, and it's very DIY. But my bowl didn't fit my pot, so I had to lift my bowl with rocks that I had found outside. And what my end product ended up being was more of a petrichor, or like a fresh rain smell.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
More so steam distilled the rocks than I did the rose petals. So it was super weird. Not at all what I wanted to do. But in the end, I did capture an aroma, not roses, but rocks. And it was pretty neat. Now I've advanced my hydrosol skills since that time.
I believe it.
Way. So now I will use something like an alembic to collect aromas. 2 years ago, we did a clary sage distillation.
Nice.
And clary sage is in the sage family. It's a stunning, dynamic, almost psychedelic flower. It's known to be euphoric. And it's a good example of a plant that I've worked with dried, and I've worked with its essential oil, but I had never worked with it fresh. And as soon as you start cutting it up to put it into the cylinder of the distill, I was getting high. And I mean like proper, I smoke a lot of pot.
Fun, yeah.
I was getting proper high from just chopping up this flower. The euphoria was like, all of us were giggling. I was not expecting that. Like I was like, oh, lavender, you smell it, you feel relaxed, cool. But clary sage, when you're chopping it up fresh, it takes you to this whole other level. And I've also done cannabis using this technique, which is really cool too. Fresh cannabis flower. Often we'll just use the bee bee buds, stuff that we're not going to smoke or sell. And same thing, you just fill up the cylinder and collect the steam. And interestingly, cannabis hydrosol, you would think would smell like bud, but it actually has a very buttery aroma.
Oh, totally. Right.
And I tried a few different strains and they all came back with this very heavy butter.
Nice, nice. I kind of get that because I feel like anytime I've done like an oil infusion in a crock pot or on my stove or something, those sort of like buttery brown butter notes come out of the herb, and you get that whether actual butter is present or not. So that's totally fun. Something I use as like a little cocktail trick is the whipped cream whipper that I have, the ISI whipper. You can add water or alcohol, usually vodka to that, and some neutral spirit. And I've done all kinds of things: coriander, lime leaf, whatever fruit you have around. But when you charge that with the nitrous, it will rupture a lot of the cells in that and release those scents and aromas into the base you've provided. So it's a really quick way to get a very quick infusion, which is fun for adding flavors to drinks or whatever, but you could use that in other applications as well.
Whoa, that's really crazy. I've never heard of that.
Yeah, it's totally fun. So hey, try that with some herb next time, and let us know if you get the same sorts of aromas you get without heat.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to give that a go because it is almost harvest season. And we grow a lot of different strains. Like the Noah's Ark of cannabis, two of everything. So it's actually really fun because it's a great opportunity to practice my smelling skills because nothing is obvious. And it's not as simple as having a strain that's, a blue and you're like, okay, we can decipher the lineage of this aroma and we can catch those delicious berries or whatever coming through. It's more like, oh, this strain is called 88 crossed with B9. And you're like, those are just numbers and letters. That doesn't mean anything. And so you have to start to really find new ways to catch the aromas outside of just smelling the fresh plant or the dried plant. So that sounds fun.
I think that's totally the way to label your breeding projects, by the way. Unless you're like, okay, this needs to be vanilla frosting. I will not stop until I get this very specific vanilla frosting profile. It could take me 20 years, right? But if you're just combining fun things and seeing what's going to pop up, I think it's almost unfair to be like, okay, this red pop cross is going to be called cream saver or whatever, and then expect it to perform in that way. No, it's like, let the plant do its thing, and you're going to miss so many cool characteristics if you're just searching for a thing because of a name that you gave it for, frankly, marketing purposes.
And especially in Ontario, having worked in California for so many years, the climate is completely different. So things that we worried about in the Southwest we don't worry about running out of water here. We don't worry about smoke damage. We don't worry about some of the bugs that happen down there. Out here, is it going to frost in the middle of October? Well, all the plants are still outside. Is it going to be so wet at the end in the fall that everything's going to go to mold, And so we're dealing with completely different elements and surprises. And so part of the breeding process here is, you'll find a strain that you really want to grow that's really popular in California or Oregon. You'll bring it here, but it'll completely powder mildew by the end of the season. And there's nothing you can do about it because it was not bred for this climate at all. And so a big part of breeding here is what can we breed that will survive the Canadian elements. And so some of our house strains, it's actually kind of crazy to see because last year we had a bunch of imported seeds that all went to powder mildew in this one section of the garden. And in the middle was one of our house strains that the grower's been evolving and working on over the past few years. And even though it was in the center of a ring of completely mildewed giant plants, that thing was spotless, absolutely completely immune to powder mildew, which is a feat, right? Anything
Yeah, totally.
powder mildew in any climate is huge, but to see it in action in the garden, untouched, was like, it was like angelic. It was like, how
Yes.
this, but it was bred to withstand our wetness, all the wetness that happens here in the
Yes.
fall.
Yeah. Oh, and that's such a great thing about cannabis too, man. It's been spread literally all over the world and acclimated to these different climates. And so you can find those things and you can work them, you know, generations in where the whole field looks completely untouched, you know. So I don't know. I find this plant like endlessly fascinating, right? Like I've been in the industry now. I was saying like 5 years last episode. Then I actually did the math and I was like, oh no, it's more like 8 years officially. And it's still something that's very interesting to me, right? And we kind of talked about this before the episode. It's like formulating now tends to be more there are these huge swings where formulating can be, like you said, you're making something for a loved one who has like a skin condition. You're making it very specifically for them and a scent that they're going to enjoy and something that's going to work well. And then there's these you know, huge Fortune 500 companies we hear about, like PBR is now has like a medicated soda with Tony Hawk on the front or something like that. And these things could be worthwhile products. There's room for them to be, right? Even though I kind of like lean way more towards the kind of like man on the hill sort of thing, because I trust these kind of experiences more than I trust someone who's making a product just like to sell. I think like we're in a really interesting spot right now where there's room for both. And I know people who homebrew and do their own beers and that kind of thing. But really, you might as well just go buy whatever is at your local brewery that you really like because they're like really doing it well. Cannabis is still kind of that thing where the dude who's growing it in his backyard or in the small little space, that might be the most craft experience you're going to find. So you can seek out those experiences. And if you're just going to the beach and really stoked about this like medicated magic seltzer with 50 milligrams in it, like you can be stoked about that too. Like those guys are still trying to do a great job. So I don't know. I guess this is just kind of my like nerdy love letter to weed still being cool after all these years.
It is still cool. And you know, I would say innovation is happening in the industry. There's a lot of things the black market was doing right that we can carry forward and continue to do. Like I do really have a love for folk tradition and just your classic slow cooker butter combo. You know, there's always going to be a place for that. And I mean, back in the day, I won't say when, but a long time ago when I first started smoking cannabis, we would just grind it up and mix it in the brownie batter, which is now today looking back insane. I can't even believe we would do something like that. And I could give you 100 reasons why that isn't the way to do it. But, you know, it had its time and place. Apple bowls, still a classic. Hot night. I mean, that's great. But I also love the sodas. It's been really fun to see extracts and the direction that they're moving in. And ways that people are using distillates and isolates in ways that I hadn't thought of before. You know, even something like infused sugar, it's not crazy and challenging, but it's just the first time I saw it, I was like, that's really neat. Like these little things coming out in the market that I love innovation. And it's been a mixed bag of feeling like there's not enough innovation considering how much money is going into the industry. Like, where are all the mad scientists right now who should be working for giant companies? You know, like infusing PBR. Okay, I would try it. No hate,
Yeah.
no shade. I would
Yeah,
totally try
sure.
that.
Yeah.
But is that the most interesting thing? No, not
Yeah,
really.
not by a long shot, right? And I do hope, yeah, we will get there, right? I do see things like companies like Blue River, or even on a wider scale, a 710, doing interesting things with their selections, with their rosin consistencies, with producing products that are often, made like solventless products that are basically made with cold water and a little heat and pressure and probably a freeze dryer. All of that stuff is still really interesting to me because, like you said, the innovations haven't really stopped. Like I'm seeing things that seem less like trends and more like, oh, hey, that's how we're doing things now because we've all kind of agreed this rosin consistency like holds the terps the best and travels the best, and it really gives you a satisfying experience every time. And the fact that that seems to be getting better is it's amazing. It's mind blowing.
And also, I think like what people are choosing to innovate with. So, um, I've I've noticed here, oftentimes, like I love my weed sodas. They'll have the ingredients on the can, as you must with any edible anything, not just weed, like literally anything you eat has to have its ingredients. But they never put what they used to infuse it. And I
Ooh.
find this very frustrating. I've noticed maybe one or two companies who have started doing that. But generally, if you look at the label, you're just going to see like water, citric acid, syrup, flavoring. And it doesn't have any mention of like, how did we get the weed in the soda? And that to me is the interesting part. Like, what did you use to get us there? Is it a distillate? And this, is kind of important too. When I worked in black market dispensaries, people would come in and buy a cookie. And they would say, oh, I'll break the cookie in half. It says 100 milligrams. I'll break it in half and it'll only be 50 milligrams. Now, traditionally, when we're using a butter infusion, like a full spectrum butter or coconut oil infusion, the whole thing gets added to the mix. The whole thing gets blended together. And so the plant matter and the menstruum is evenly split out in the batter. So you could break that cookie in half. However, that is not how most companies are doing it these days because they're not getting as accurate a measurement as if they were using a distillate. And so what happens is now they're injecting each cookie individually with the distillate to have spot on dosages. So this is great if you want exact dosage, but if you don't know that it's made with distillate and you break that cookie in half, your bite might be the only one with weed in it. And your friend that you gave a cookie to just ate a normal piece of cookie. And that isn't cool either. Not everyone would think that way. You would just think this says this. If I cut it in half, it's half.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think we're still using the brownies with the grinder weed in it as like our template for these things. But that's not the case anymore, right? And even with beverages, like we're seeing huge differences. Early on, I was distributing for a couple of different beverage companies, right? And the kombucha company had the base like mixed so much better with the cannabis oil they were doing. And so you would not get any sort of like weird oils floating on top or anything like that. It just, the kombucha was like a great experience with no separation. Some of the other products, you would pour it out the beverage into a bottle, and then there would be like almost like an oil slick left around in the can that would go up on
Ew,
top, right?
no. Ew.
Yeah. Thankfully, things have gotten much more sophisticated, and we're seeing like crystal clear sodas with really nice carbonation and flavors on par with like a LaCroix or whatever. So the fact that we've kind of developed these like water soluble technologies for the flavoring and the cannabinoids, like that's pretty impressive. And the company I was just writing about, I referenced them earlier, Magic Number. It took them a few years, but now they're using strain-specific live resin in their sodas, which is really nice because you get the method of extraction right there. you get the company that produced it and the farm that cultivated the material. So I and the strain as well. So like, oh, okay, I should expect, if I can trust that, this is how it should make me feel. So I think that that's kind of some place that we should expect from all of our producers here in a year or 10 at the most.
Yeah, and I don't know. I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but a couple years ago, here specifically in the beverage industry, they realized that the cans that they were packaging the beverages in were actually chemically reacting with the distillate or whatever they were using to infuse the sodas. And so what was happening was that it was actually eating away at the cannabis itself. So you would drink a soda and you wouldn't feel anything because it was gone due to the type of packaging they were using.
Like all the effect is like left in the can liner. Oh, that's great.
And so it was like ruining all these sodas, but no one really noticed right away because remember, we have very strict dosage laws here. And so most of the sodas are always going to be under 10 milligrams. Sometimes the average one that I've seen is around 2 or 2.5. So a couple years back, I drank a soda, didn't feel anything and just thought, oh, it must be because it was like 2 milligrams. Maybe I've just been.
I guess you like weed too much. Oh well.
Yeah. See, meanwhile, it's like an $8 can, and I just drank. I might as well bought, a Coca-Cola.
You had to throw away the best part, right?
Yeah. So that was I don't know. And now, so there's been this packaging shift, but this is all part of this like evolution that's happening where we're having to learn, in that case, the hard way, that how we were trying to progress wasn't actually working, but it's created new innovations. The last expo I went to, there's this new soda company. I haven't actually seen them in stores yet, so I'm really hoping that they didn't go under. I'm really hoping they made it to market. But they were putting, it was like a fizzy water, and you push the top down. It has this like thing, and you press it in, and the fizz like shoots, the syrup like shoots into the thing. So you're basically like, I don't know what to call that type of lid, but all of the good stuff is stored in this little bubble, and then you press it into the soda. And so it was almost like you're making it fresh. And they were like, this is a solution to this can liner problem, is that it sits in this little bubble and it just gets pressed in. Downside, it was all made of plastic. It wasn't recyclable. This is very important to me as a consumer, is the amount of waste that we're producing. So solution to the weed problem to the plastic problem, but again, maybe a little bit of a step forward. And unfortunately, at these expos, they don't get to give away infused samples. That's sort of a bummer around here. So I got to try their beverage uninfused, and it tasted like a tasty fizzy bevy. Who's to say, hopefully with the weed it tastes even better, but you never know, because sometimes that grass licking dirt flavor comes through, and I kind of love it. Not everyone likes to feel like they're licking a lawn when they drink a weed soda. Fair.
I do love those like fresh herb flavors, like the garden fresh. There was some candy company, I don't know, years and years ago, called like Dank Licks or Kush Pops, or whatever random name that you would buy at like a Spencer's Gifts or whatever. And I actually really love that kind of like weedy flavor of things. I didn't love like a whole big chunk of sugar in my mouth, so I never bought too many of those. But I was like, hey, this is surprisingly convincing for something that is clearly like they're not using cannabis to flavor it with.
So you were naming some products earlier. Did you say like bacon? Was that one of the products you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, medicated bacon.
What? Yeah, like, okay, but how were they selling? Like raw? No. Bacon bites?
Here's my problem. It was too wet, right?
Ew.
It was,
No.
yes. It was like a foil mylar you would tear open like a really bad jerky bag. I would not try it at that point. I'm like, wet meat in a bag can just be for somebody else. So maybe it was amazing. Maybe it was terrific. It was just not for me.
And it was like raw, or it was just like it was cooked?
No, it was cooked, but then I don't know, sealed after that. Yeah, yeah. I just remember it had like a peppery slime to it. Yeah, yeah. We
Yeah.
saw some bad things. In fact, so that was on the kind of, it was legal gray market is what that was, right? But when I was in Las Vegas a few years ago for a conference, it was the first time I got to go check out the dispensaries there. I went to I don't remember the name of them, Planet 13 and the one just around the block, and bought up a bunch of stuff so I could try it out, check it out. And that was likely the worst edible I've ever had. It was just cake balls. We're all familiar with cake balls, right? At this point, like frosting infused, hand rolled, chocolate dipped. So it sounds like it could be good, but these two were having moisture issues in the bag where the frosting part had gotten all wet and the cake part was falling apart, and the whole thing had been smashed a little bit because no one ever cared about this product. And so, yeah, just a really disappointing experience all around. So I'm very thankful that we're past the point of like these things just being a novelty, right? At least where we're at. If you're in a market where they're just going to open a bunch of dispensaries and someone is going to put stickers on a box and you can't actually see the product, like maybe skip that one. Maybe just go find your friend who has some like regular old weed and make a an oil infusion like Amanda was talking here.
Yeah, you never know. Here we're not allowed to see anything in the legal market, so it's always a mystery. Everything is always super packaged and hidden. But I think that there's been some really solid brands that have emerged recently. Last week I saw Fritz, and Fritz is a legacy brand that's moved into the legal market. They're a super small business, so I have the utmost respect for that hustle because moving into the legal industry is not easy at all
No,
here.
by all
There's
means.
a lot of regulations. And their signature product that sort of put them on the map in the legacy market was a granola. And
Hmm.
it sounds so simple, but we've also all eaten granola. It is a hit or miss product. It could be really
Yeah,
good. It could be super fucking dry.
right.
The
Someone
fruit,
could call it granola, and you could say, "Look, this is just gorp that you've made."
yeah. And then the thing with infusing, a few years ago, I tried like a infused pretzel snack, and that was just a literal pretzel they bought at a bulk store and dipped in coconut oil. That's not
Oh,
good for me. I don't want to just taste coconut oil flavor. And so with these infused products, like even the granola, you would think, oh God, please don't taste like you just had coconut oil poured on you. I really don't want to eat that. And it is not anything like that.
very good.
So hallelujah, they're coming out. But this is something I talk about in some of the classes that I teach, which is not everything has to be coconut oil. So if you're a home baker or you're a home crafter and you're trying to make your own products, everyone makes stuff out of coconut oil or butter. Now, I spent a lot of years making stuff out of butter. I cannot stand the smell of butter slow cooking for 6 hours in a small apartment. I just hate, I'm not a fan of that smell. And then coconut oil to me is just so boring.
Yeah,
There's
yeah. Plus, it
so
has
many
a lot of its own character that maybe you don't want in everything, right?
very distinct as a flavor.
Yes.
It really, and depending on how good you are at infusing things, I generally do intense infusions so that you can just add a half a teaspoon and have it be 100 milligrams in the whole batch or whatever. So I do like really high dose infusions, which you always have to warn your friends beforehand. Especially in California, having endless access to plants, sometimes we would put like a few pounds into a very concentrated amount of butter or oil. And actually, this is a circumstance where coconut oil is a great choice because you can add water to what you're making, put the water and oil in the freezer, and it'll separate. So then you can just pull off your brick of coconut oil and discard the water. And because cannabis isn't water soluble, none of the THC is going to go in the water. It's all going to absorb into the butter, but you get that full coating. So if you're putting 1 cup of coconut oil to 3 pounds of weed, you know it's not going to cover. But at the end of the day, you get a very, very, very high dose product. And so you can just take any recipe you're making and just add that half a teaspoon to your recipe. And you don't have to use a full cup, as if, you can just add your water and add your half teaspoon, if that makes sense.
Right. And if you are like a medical user with high demands for this stuff, I feel like RSOs and the super strong coconut oil method is kind of your best bets, because you don't want to eat a bunch of medicated bacon or a handful of gummies every time you feel like shit, right? That's not great. But you can add that into a smoothie or your lunch, whatever that is, and kind of consume that in a much easier way. And I like that too, because with that just small amount of oil, you're not going to have to wait a long time to digest everything, right? It's not going to be hours later that you're going to feel that effect. It's going to be pretty immediate. So that's
Plus,
great.
like we were saying in the beginning, there are so many things that you can mix cannabis with. So if I'm a smoothie person, I love drinking smoothies. And I actually, I'm here, there's tons of herbs here. We have this like amazing selection of mushroom powders. And so I've gotten really, really into adding like some cordyceps, some reishi, and some lion's mane into my smoothies in the morning with a little bit of CBD. And it's actually creating this, food medicine in the daytime, a few drops of CBD. And that's like a really great way to start my day with this like immune boosting superfood. And just a couple of drops of weed, and the mushrooms and weed go really well together. You do the mushrooms and weed sometimes too, don't you?
Yeah, and coffee, like those things are together my morning ritual with like a little exercise. Mushrooms, reishi, cordyceps, lion's mane, and then coffee and cannabis have been like my morning routine for a while now, and I feel like it's really changed the way I'm able to like get productive and get into that kind of like flow state where I'm not thinking about a million other things. I'm very focused on the present, which is helpful for me. Like I certainly didn't have that kind of focus or drive in my 20s or 30s, where I was like, all right, I'm just gonna wake up, or early 30s. I'm still in my 30s, you guys. Where I'd wake up and like smoke a bowl to get my like wake and bake on, and then kind of chill for the next couple of hours, right? Unless I had something really important to go and do, like it wasn't happening. But now with the functional mushrooms and maybe a good smoothie or whatever, it's like I'm ready to kick some ass.
Yes. And you know what? We're both long-term stoners. My memory is not what it used to be, short-term and otherwise. And I've
Tell me about
noticed the mushroom breakfast is working for me. So I've done it for now a couple months straight. Really, I'm not very good at routine, so this is a feat for me as a person.
You
having my breakfast smoothie, I've noticed that the other day I was doing something. I went into the other room and I was like, oh shit, what did I come in here for? And I remembered.
Yes.
And all I can say is that I think it's the mushroom smoothies. I really think they're working. That same day I was lying in bed about to go to sleep and I was like, oh, did I turn that thing off? And it came into my mind. I was like, yes, I did. And in my life, that is not a thing.
Yeah. These are important. Yeah. And if you're somebody who's like, yeah, I love cannabis, I smoke it all the time, and you have not experienced the short-term memory loss, come on. It's you will.
Also, lucky you. That sounds great.
Right.
That is fantastic. I guess if you're like us, start doing your breakfast smoothies. I'm also in my 30s, and there's no time like the present to start turning the health dial up a little as smokers, as we do.
Right. Well, and I've even seen a lot of folks like pre-workout seems to be such like an important part of other people's regimen. Um, and I feel like if you're the sort of folks that's like, I don't actually need 400 milligrams of caffeine, but I do need like an extra little push or boost, then try this instead. Because I'm like you. Once I sort of made it a routine, it's just like a daily habit now.
Yeah.
And we were just gone for the weekend, and both of us were like, "Hey, we should have brought our fungo stuff that we mix into everything." So it's now. I think I might have to get like a little travel jar to bring with me because it's indispensable.
That's really funny because I'm headed up to the farm this week. And so I had to pack up with all my shit. And normally I'm like a one backpack person. I travel very light. And I have an entire tote bag of powders that I was like, I'm gonna be going for a couple weeks, but I won't survive without them. So now suddenly I just have like a sack of powders that I have to bring with me. Or I might die. I don't know what'll happen, but I need my powders in the morning.
That's all right. You'll have your cup, and you'll be out there with all the ladies on the hill, and you'll be like, "Yeah, I brought the right powders."
And the chickens, yeah, it's going to be a full week. And actually, I guess next week we'll be doing the podcast from the farm. So I'm hoping the internet is on point, so we can actually maybe I could take it in the garden. Since it's looking like every week I'm bringing a new location. So
I love it.
we'll see how next week goes.
Yeah, we've got a traveling journalist on the team.
Yeah.
That's great. I think like that's it. That's the show. Let's wrap up. Let's send people out, and they can show up next week for another chat.
That sounds great.
Cool. We are still taking questions. We're kind of batching a couple episodes before the first one goes out, so please send them our way. Amanda, go ahead and give us your contact info if people want to reach out.
Yeah, absolutely. Excitingly this week, our Instagram was returned to us. So
Yes,
we
it's
actually
there.
have an Instagram now. And I believe it's the.smoking spot.
Yeah, see, it
It
even
is.
rhymes.
So it's up and it's in action. So jump on there. We're always looking for more stories from you guys about your favorite smoking spots. And we have a new one this week.
Yeah, this is from weed writer Action Matt Jackson, who is kind enough to send over his favorite smoking spot. So we're going to drop that in right about here.
So maybe it's because before consumption lounges, we never had any sanctioned spaces to light up. But there's always been something about smoking weed in public that excites me. Like this one time I was right outside of Wyoming. I was on tour playing bass in a country rock band, and the lead singer didn't want anyone smoking weed on the trip. I had this little roach in an Altoid tin because someone had given me after the show, and when we stopped for gas, I went inside to use the bathroom. The room had this tiny window above the urinal, so I decided I'd chief the whole roach, blow it out the window, and then run back to the van. And so as I finished inhaling the whole thing, I heard the bathroom door swing open and someone walking behind me to the stall. I ran out of there, my lungs full of smoke, and started booking for the exit. And I had almost made it when out of the corner of my eye, I spotted this big display for Amish fudge at the counter, and I stopped. And that was all it took for my lungs to burst, so I reached out and I grabbed this fuzzy white teddy bear on the shelf below the fudge and exhaled right into its chest. Luckily, nobody saw me because that bear was dripping smoke, and my mouth left a brown circle like some kind of reverse Care Bear. I threw the thing back on the shelf, jumped headfirst into the van, and drove straight for the Wyoming border.
Great.
Okay, yeah, that's
Thanks,
fantastic.
man. That was awesome. You can find me on Instagram at the Loud 100. I do cannabis impressions and food stuff and all kinds of things. Amanda, did you give us your tag already?
Mine is emerald.temple.living, and I launched some really exciting products this week that I think some of you guys will be really keen on checking out. And of course, I want to do a shout out to our amazing house musician who wrote our awesome theme song, Gator Troubadour, my buddy Austin Warren. Thanks again. You can find all his music at gatortroubadourmusic.bandcamp.
Yes, that's what it is.
Yes.
Yeah. Right on, guys. Give that a listen and shoot us a follow. Send us your questions, and we'll be here next week.
Hold it down and don't ever stop. Well, you can always find a smoking spot. Yeah, you can always find a smoking spot.